Welcome to the Here's Waldo podcast, where we sit down with top visionaries and creatives in the video game industry. Together, we'll unravel their journeys and learn more about the path they're forging ahead. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Mintos, founder and CEO of Here's Waldo Recruiting. We are a boutique video game recruitment firm, and this is the Here's Waldo podcast. In every episode, we dive deep into conversations with creatives, founders, and executives about what has gone into their success. You can expect to hear lessons from their journey and get a glimpse into the future of the industry. This episode is brought to you by Here's Waldo Recruiting. We are a boutique recruiting firm, you guessed it, for the game industry. We value quality over quantity, transparency, communication, and diversity. Before introducing today's guest, I want to give a thank you to David Yee for introducing us, although I feel like we were connected in many different ways. David, you're the best. Today we have Mike Fridley with us. Mike is the CEO and studio director of Squanch Games. He has contributed to many titles since he started in the industry 26 years ago, including The Elder Scrolls, Morrowind and Oblivion, Fallout 3, Reckoning, Call of Cthulhu, PGA Tour, NBA Live, Dragonvale, and most recently, Squanch Games' hit game, High on Life. Let's get started. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about Squanch.
So we're kind of outliers in the industry a little bit as far as the types of games that we're interested in making. Like the majority of us are all senior folks at Squanch. We're a fully remote studio, so we don't have in-office work anymore. We did up until the pandemic, and then once the pandemic hit, we had to work remote. And then we found out that, shockingly, we were actually more productive and more creative remote than we were in person, which goes against every natural instinct I had in the industry that this would never work, but it worked for this crazy group. So your mileage may vary at studio to studio, but ours, it happens to work. And that we're more focused on games that we want to play. I think like our executive team has over 100 years experience making games. We're all old and have played games our whole lives too. So
you're wise.
Yes. And we're not so much interested in following trends in gaming. We're not going to go after the mobile market. Not that that's a trend anymore. It's well established, but we're not going as games as a service. We're not going for microtransactions or gachapon boxes or any of those, the newer elements that have been introduced into gaming over the last decade or so. We're more interested just about making a fun single player experience. So that's been our focus, is single player narrative comedy games. And comedy is a bit of a reason that I think we're a bit different than most studios. Like I said, I worked at a ton of studios. The rule is always don't try to be funny in games. And everybody tells you that. I heard it from the first job I worked until the last one I worked. And it was, just our writers aren't comedians, so we shouldn't be doing comedy. So that made sense. And, I get it. The times that I've worked on games, there's designers try to inject comedy into games all the time. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So we kind of took a novel approach to it at Squanch. Instead of hiring game writers to work on a comedy game, we hired comedy writers to work on a video game. So we taught them how to make a video game. We hired folks that had never written for video games, but they'd written for multiple different sitcoms. Our narrative director worked on the Eric Andre show. Like there was a bunch of folks that we've had through either contract writers or full-time writers, staff writers. Like Brian Weissall is on our staff now. He's a senior staff writer. He guy that created Hot Streets, and he's also a writer on the World Crackers on Adult Swim as well. So, we took the idea of like, okay, funny is the part that's missing. Let's find the people that can make funny stuff and then tell them how that can fit into a game. And we kind of design the game around the funny narrative that plays through. And it worked. It worked for us. We have a bunch of great voice actors that came on, and we've kind of grown relationships with them. They all love like We had Gabrielle Sidibe on our DLC for the game, and she's going to be in future products for us as well. We kind of established that relationship with her. JB Smooth's worked with us. There's probably a pretty big announcement coming from JB Smooth in the next week or so that's related to Squanch that I can't talk about until they break it. But
yeah, by the time it comes out, it'll be out there. So
it's okay. No, I'm not going to talk about it. I was like, no, I just heard everybody on the production team yelling at me at the same time in my head.
And
so
your PR people,
yeah. There was a moment that the devil on my shoulder almost made me run it, but
I saw it in your eyes.
Yeah.
So why do you think that other people don't do humor?
It's hard. It's you want your game to appeal to your audience. You want your game to appeal to as many people as you can. You want to have a nice sized audience because at the end of the day, it is a business, especially in a game like we make. Almost all of our revenue comes from initial sales. So we need we need a solid game. We need a game that a lot of people like, a lot of people are going to talk about, a lot of people get excited about. We think is fun. We want to play it. Like those are all the kind of key ingredients. And for that to come through and not suck is incredibly hard because you're trying to make jokes in a world where there's decision trees. So there's decision trees, there's forks in the road. We're not on rails. It is a somewhat linear game, but you can play multiple different bounties in different orders and stuff like that. So there is some exploration to it. So what it does is it throws a big variable into all your narrative, all your decision trees. It throws that variable in there that they may pick this time and pick this time and do this time. So the jokes have to work for no matter what you did. Sometimes that involves having 5 jokes for the same situation because if they did this, then it plays that joke. And so we have to have a lot of bases covered, and any of them can't stink. If any of them stink, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
I like that word, stink. For me, I'm just thinking people are very sensitive, might be the right word this day. I mean, I'm always, from a business standpoint, I feel like people are worried to say the wrong thing often, even when they have good intentions, because someone doesn't like the thing that you said, which you may or may not mean in a bad way. So how do you balance that with humor?
What's that?
How do you balance that with humor, right? Because
it's definitely a tightrope to walk. We don't have zero boundaries. We don't have zero boundaries at Squanch. We won't make rape jokes. We won't make child assault jokes, stuff like that, like just stuff that's just heinous. We would never joke about it because there's nothing funny about it. Like it's not that we're afraid to talk about it. But it's just not funny. Like you could really, really try to make a rape joke funny, but why bother? Like why try to be that one person that made this horrific thing funny? So there's a line that we won't cross, but we do like running up to that line a lot because it really does. People like jokes. People like adolescent humor. Like every reviewer has their take on whether our humor is sophisticated or not. And it's not. Like it's not sophisticated. We tell some sophisticated jokes. There's some sophisticated stuff going on, but it's a lot of like grammar school jokes too. There's a lot of stuff that are just sight gags. Like we have a guy whose head is just 2 butt cheeks and he farts when he talks. Like there's stupid stuff in our game and we know it. So we'll often getting that. It's not shock value, but it's more like, okay, this is a game that doesn't take itself too seriously. This is a game that doesn't try to be this is the moral upright brigade of gaming here. It's like, if you want to go have some fart jokes and have some silly, like legitimately good humor happening in your game, go play it. Like that's the message there. And we shot a kid in the game. It wasn't really a kid. He just looked like a kid. He was a full-grown adult, but nobody knew he was a kid. We have an alien that sells weird stuff. There's all kinds of very adult themes in it. We don't shy away from adult humor. We're an M-rated game. Anything we do will be adult humor. We're not targeting children. Like we're not targeting the younger audience. We're targeting people like us, like Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, that are like, oh, I just want to have some fun in a game that doesn't take itself too seriously and actually has really good gameplay. And I feel like I'm compelled to come back and play. So it's not just jokes. It's actually a really solid shooter on top of it, which was not accidental. We spent a lot of time trying to get the nuts and bolts of boss fights, and we have multiple weapon issues that you have to sort out with alternate powers and stuff like that. So it is quite a bit of combat design, boss design, stuff like that that went into the game. So it feels good. And then you're like, oh, okay, silly humor on top of that. It just kind
Yeah.
of gelled. And it's kind of like the summer books that you used to read when you went to the beach, where it was like, I know it's not going to be like something that I'm going to put on my bookshelf and say that impress people by reading it, but it's fun. Like, it's a fun summer game. It's a fun summer read, and that's what we're trying to do. Like, we're trying just to make games that are fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a statement on anything. It can just be fun. And that's what people have taken to, and that's the world. It's growing. Our world is growing into multiple different mediums now, and we're doing everything we can to keep growing it. But it's a fun place to be, and like everybody at the studio loves working on it. So there's
Yeah.
that too.
That's why I'm in games. People are so passionate. So
Yeah.
you touched on having to make a complex game. I was going to make an overnight success joke that everyone's like, oh, this is such an overnight success. It's like, no, years and so much thought went into this. But
Yeah.
what's so interesting for me and from running a podcast is hearing about what goes into making a game. What are all of the decisions that you had to
Sure.
make? And I mean, your game could be totally different. So what are the major decisions or things that went wrong, however you want to phrase that, in the game? And how did you end up making the decisions that you made, and why?
Uh, I understand the question, and I would have a completely different answer for every project except for High on Life. Because
Okay.
High on Life was a unique project in that what we did as our first playable and kind of our concept work and our pre-production work, we landed pretty damn close to it. And it's the only time that's ever happened to me in game development where we didn't stray way far off of our original concept. So I think the original concept, the idea behind it, the characters, the world, everything like that, we had it pretty much day one in our first playable. Then we went through and built a vertical slice as we were staffing up the team. We're a pretty small team, and to start off with like 12, 15 people.
Oh yeah.
And we were starting to staff up, and we built our vertical slice, I think, with about 20 devs. It had, kind of a representation of a bunch of the game systems. We built what we call Beautiful Corner that showed off the visuals of what the game is going to look like. Because, it's a lot of work to get an entire level up to the visual bar. So we just have one little spot so we can show people like, this is what it's going to look like. And here's the gameplay. We're still really early pre-production. So it became that. And then our creative leaders, Eric and Mikey, they're both very much hands-on directors. They're very much they get in there, they understand what they want, they understand what can be done and what can't, and they will get in there and do it if nobody else can. So it's really great to have folks like that on the team that can come in and not only come up with the vision for the game, but also force it into reality. Because
Yeah.
it became kind of everybody comes onto the game, it's not fleshed out yet, and it starts to get fleshed out. And kind of the credo we live by, if it's not better than the original concept, then don't do it. You have to be able to pitch your idea and why it's better than what we were going to do. And if you can't, then we're not going to do it. It's just because that is going to make the best game. And a lot of times when you're in pre-production, folks will write like a giant GDD, a game development doc, whether it's on Confluence or some wiki or heaven forbid, just a bunch of docs, then it feels like, okay, I'm supposed to follow this. This is what I'm supposed to make. And devs, if you let them, they will get into that habit, and it's been forced on them through the industry, throughout just the way we build games in most studios, where it's just a punch list of stuff to do. Where you're like, okay, you're my senior environment artist. Here's the biome that we're going to build. Bam, 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 bam. Here's all your tasks.
Yeah.
We did a little bit different. Like we look at it and say like, okay, here's the theme. Here's the box you have to work in. Like, it's going to be really vibrant, outdoor, jungly type. We're going to have mercs around here, like stuff like that. But we want a lot of verticality to it because we want to do some jumping puzzles, but go make something that's cool. And then they go make something that's cool. And we look at it and we give them feedback, and
Cool.
we don't work in paper, we work in game. So everything is in game, everything's an iteration in game. All of our directors are, very fluent in Unreal. We use Unreal for it, and they're able to get in there and tell when something's off, tell when something can be better, tell when something can be improved, or anything like that. So it's a lot of just hands-on caring about the game. So it's a bit different than every other project I worked on, where we had clear visionaries, but the fine print, like the places in between, got filled in by the team, and we just hired really good people
Got out of
that
their way.
could get in there and work undirected. Like I don't need feedback every hour on my work. I don't need feedback every day on my work. Like those are the kind of people, and they go off and do their thing, and you come back and you're excited or even sometimes surprised that they exceeded what you thought they could do. So we've pushed that out as a culture throughout the studio. And as we brought more people on, we're up to, I think, 72 now. As we brought more people on, it's been a learning curve for every single one of them that have been senior, because they come from that world where it's very much
Totally.
a punch list of things that you're supposed to do. Your influence on the game is limited to just your area, and you don't have a lot of creative control over anything. But at Squanch, on High on Life, it was very much the opposite. It was like your opportunity to shine. If you suck and you shit the bed, then we're not going to use it, and you're probably going to not fit in with Squanch. But if you're good at what you do and you're good at working undirected, then you love it here. It's the mecca for game development at that point. So we just kind of harnessed that and just kept making it better and better. We play it a lot. We do a lot of internal play testing, and we do a lot of external play testing. We do a lot of feedback on loops, so we're not drinking our own Kool-Aid all the time.
And when do you start that?
We started early. We just got out of pre-production on the game we're working on now, and we're already play testing. We've already had 2 play tests in the last month with external people. So it very much, the folks that run our play test internally are great. They're really good proctors at getting the kind of information that we need for the designers and artists. And it's a good time. Like everybody loves to see people play their game. And I always enjoy watching designers die a little bit inside when the players do stuff completely different than they thought they were going to, which is always hilarious to me. But I came from QA 26 years ago, so it used to be my job to break stuff. So some sick part of me always likes to aggravate designers for some reason. I don't know why, but
Awesome. And how do you balance, what you want to do and what feels good to the team with what the audience wants, what people are actually going to buy? I think that's always such a struggle.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a big risk. Like we try to hire people that have the same sense of humor as us and the same sense of humor as we thought our target audience would have. And, our target audience are like Rick and Morty and American Dad and Family Guy and those kinds of watchers that watch, adult animation. We hired people that were specifically love that kind of stuff. We even put it's a joke and it will never hold up in any court, but we put a line in our employment agreement that says, we're going to say adult stuff here, so please don't get offended by it. Even in our hiring documentation, we talk about how it's going to, we have that sense of humor. Like we're going to drop F-bombs.
On the job page, you even get that, right? Yeah. I feel like you go to your website, you're like, oh, this is very clear. This is who these people are,
right.
which is great. But I love that. You're like, hey, here's who I am. Here's how we are. You're really upfront.
Yeah. I mean, it's a challenge for our director of people ops.
Yes.
I don't envy Raina in her job to try to get us to walk that line, but it very much feels like a collective sense of humor that we have at the studio. We could tell a lot during interviews too, if you're going to click with us. Like we're real big on cross-discipline interviewing when we bring candidates in. So it's not just like artists interviewing artists.
Yeah.
Like an artist interviewing a programmer is not going to know anything about the technical side of it, or not much. They're not going to be able to dive into their code and do anything like that. But they do know if the guy's a dick, or they do know if she doesn't have a sense of humor at all, was really uptight. Like they know stuff like that. So it's like that fit for us is super important. Getting the people that will get excited about it, because we need them excited to go off and be able to work undirected and make the quality stuff that we want. So that's really important for us, that they aren't just doing it because they need a job as a VFX artist or something. Like, I need a paycheck. It's like, okay, you do realize we're going to do crazy stuff. Like we're going to do infantile games. I wish I could talk about this other game that we have in incubation right now that is insane, but it's a lot of stuff to take in. If you're used to working at I worked at Hasbro. A child's game is very much different. Like working on Transformers is very much different than working on an adult animated game. So that's become a super important part of kind of our culture. I hate using the word culture because it always sounds so corporate and dumb, but it very much is our culture, our vibe.
Your ethos.
Yes. Okay. That sounds a little pretentious.
Okay. Just trying to find synonyms.
I mean,
for you here.
I'm fine with pretentious. I just
No, that's not your vibe.
it's not my vibe.
You're more down to earth. You're more real. I like it. Okay. In all of your years of game development,
Yeah.
what is your aha moment that you wish you knew sooner that you can share with our listeners? That's what it's all about.
There's a lot of them. I think probably the best rule of thumb that I learned over the years is that every project, every studio, every dev is different. We fool ourselves a lot. I worked in QA, I worked in design, I worked as a creative director, I worked as a producer and project manager for most of my career. So I've worked in multiple different departments. And the one thing that holds true that I found in the multiple studios that I've worked at is that every time I think I have a plan, it's always has to be changed. It's always has to be adapted to the project. It has to be adapted to the people on the project. It has to be adapted to how they work. With the rare exception of stuff like High on Life, most of the time your creative is going to have to adapt. You're going to have to be adaptable all the way through. And we kind of get in this mindset, whether you're an animator or a producer or lead engineer, that the way I've always done it is the way that we should do it because that's worked. This has worked, so I'm going to do it. And we're not really happy with that. We question almost every process, question almost every pipeline. Could we do this better? Like lip sync became super important to us because it's so much talking in the game and we want the facial expressions and everything to be there because that's part of a joke. It's really hard. Another reason why people don't do humor is because a lot of it's body language too. It's not just the words that are coming out of the character. So we have to stay flexible there and be able to adapt to all the different variables that come up in making the game. So I've thought that like, okay, I started my career, we did project planning by waterfall. It was like just a waterfall plan, and you had old MS project, and you broke it out, and like as soon as one day passed, the whole thing had to be rebuilt because something shifted. And then we got into Handsoft and Jira and all the different platforms for project management and Agile and these different methodologies. And they all have great points to them, and there's something to be taken from all of them, I think. And the pitfall and kind of the aha moment was that I can't just take one solution that I've used in the past that's worked and apply it to every studio and every situation that you're in. Like when I first started at Squanch, I know Tanya, who was the CEO at the time and one of the founders of the studio, when they hired me, I came in, I said, all right, I'm not going to make any decisions for 2 months. And they're like, really? Like I could come in and make decisions immediately. I have enough experience to do that, but I don't have the context. I don't understand the games we're working on. I don't understand the people that are working on the games. I don't understand the audience yet. And the only way you can get that, not just reading some design doc, is to work with the people for a bit. Go into meetings with them, talk to them, see how they're handling this, see what do they think we should be working on? What do they think is the most high priority? Like those kind of things, like getting all that information from the team who's been working on it already, and then applying it the best way that you can see fit based on your experience. Like, okay, narrative is much easier to do in kind of a waterfall way where it's just, we got scripts, they're going to punch them out, we can schedule them, actors have to be scheduled, studio time has to be scheduled. It's very much a waterfall. But system design, boss design, nope. Like we get in there and have a full checklist and then play it, and this is horrible, we need to redo the whole thing. So we may rebuild a different arena, we may change the boss out. All that has to be agile. You have to be able to adapt to it. And the constraints that we put on ourselves, because that's what feels comfortable and that's the known, I know that this is going to work, is a trap that I've fallen into before. And coming to my aha moment was like, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. We can do custom plans. We can do custom solutions for everything. And it made the games better. Like it made the games better. It made them better to work on. People weren't as frustrated with the process. You really just have to listen. And it's never a point where you're like, okay, our workflows are stellar. Our process is untouchable. We've made everything as perfect as we possibly can. It should work. Nope, it's going to change. Like you're going to have different personnel, you're going to have different moods, you have different game, you're going to work on a different level of that game. Like whatever it is, variables change all the time. And if you get comfortable and you're not trying to improve your process and trying to improve your workflows or do retros and try to figure out what went wrong, what went well, if you're not getting that kind of information from the team, from the people that are making the game, and then your customers, once it's out there in the world, if you're not using that information to change the way you do things, you're just being really bullheaded. You're just
Right.
like, okay, I know better than everyone. I'm gonna put my head down and I've been doing this 26 years. We're gonna do it my way. Like that, like, yes, you can force games through. I've been at studios that people have forced games through in that way. And it shows on the other end. I worked at EA Sports for multiple years. I saw that happen every year for EA Sports games. They were very much a formulaic way of doing things. You don't break the formula. This is the process, A to B. Where this is where the bots come on. This is blah, 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 and they just churn that sucker out every year. But they have to hit a date every year. They have to hit that date. So they have to be that rigid process. And for games like ours that are kind of more free-formed, and especially comedy, there's no really way to gauge whether or not how long it's going to take something to get funny.
Yeah.
Like the
Or
first draft
fun,
is
right?
never the first draft is never as funny as the final draft. So like we're always kind of like, this may land quickly or may take a long time for this joke to land or this bit to land or this we get this activity to be fun, and it's going to look horrible and not be funny until it does. So we just have to be comfortable with sitting in that filth of it sucking for long enough to make it good instead of just bailing on it. Because people that are stuck in kind of that rigid way of doing things, they'll have a review and it's like, it's not good, we need to cut it, and they bail. We're like, no, that idea is good, it's just not good yet. Like, we need to get it there, and then we continue to iterate on it until it gets good. Very stubborn about making a joke or a situation land at Squanch.
Just take some
We
time.
cut stuff, but I don't know how many times I've heard people say, this is my dream thing. I want to do this and I want to do that. We're very much not baby killers. Baby killers is kind of a game dev term for being able to kill your baby. Like, oh, I love this feature. I love this, whatever. We're terrible at it. Like, we're terrible at being baby killers. Like, we will. Like, eventually we get to the point where we're like, okay, we got to ship
You
this thing
have to.
eventually.
Yeah.
We eventually will cut some stuff loose, but man, you really have to pry it out of their hands. And it really, that just shows how much the team cares about what they're working on. And they're actually passionate about whatever their contribution to the game is, because they don't want to see it go. They want to like, give me one more chance at it. It's been years since I've mandated any OT or crunch at any studio that I've been at. But I've been lucky enough to work at studios where people really cared about the game. Like, okay, I can stay a few extra hours to make this good, rather than, okay, it's good enough, I could check it off on my JIRA list and be done. Like,
Yeah.
that's what this all fosters. It all fosters like that kind of per person buy-in that you want on a team, that I actually care about this, not because I might get fired, but I care about it because I want it to be good.
That's why games
So,
is the best. People really care a lot.
yeah,
And they want to
yeah,
make a fun thing that delights so many people.
yeah,
So you started at Squanch as an EP and you moved
yeah.
COO to CEO. Can you talk a little bit about your journey and
Sure.
learnings from your different exec roles?
Yeah, I was a franchise development director at EA, and then I came over and was a VP of development at Hasbro with Backflip. And I kept getting further and further up the food chain in these bigger studios. And what happened was I just stopped connecting with the people I was working with. Like, it became like, I see the same 4 people every day. At EA, there was like 600 people working in the Tiburon studio. Like, I didn't know anybody's name. Like, we walk by people in the hall, I have no idea who they are, what team they worked on, what they do, anything like that. And, when I started in the industry, that was completely different. I was part of the dev team. I was in the trenches, and it was like, I got to know everybody, and it was just a much more pleasant experience to know people rather than just make decisions from some ivory tower and everybody has to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, when Hasbro shut down our studio in Boulder, I had an opportunity to open a studio for Scopely in Boulder, but Scopely does almost all mobile games. So I didn't really want to get back into mobile games again. I wanted to move out of that. And I wanted to move into something that I felt more attached to the team, and I knew everybody's name. And I'm big on being able to be a facilitator rather than just declaring things need to happen. I want to facilitate them to happen. So I was like, when I interviewed at Squanch, I was like, I know it's a step back. That was the big question. Like, why take the step back? Like,
That's
why
always the question. Yeah.
Yeah, why go to EP when you're, been at the executive level? And that was my answer. It was really like, I just like making games. I like making games with people. And It started for me back in first edition D&D on my parents' kitchen table making dungeons. I just want to be part of that creative process as much as I can. I'm not a talented creator. I tried it for a bit, but I'm not that great at it. But I want to work with those people. Like, creatives are crazy people, and they completely think differently than I do in most areas. Like,
but it's so fun. It's so fun to pick their brain and to figure out where their mind goes.
Right.
It's fascinating. It's my job. It's the best.
It's I've learned a lot with working with creatives over the year, different ways of thinking about things. I care about things differently now than I did before I started working with creatives all the time. I care about certain parts of the game more now. So that part of it, I just felt like I was going in, and I could have been working at an insurance company. It would have been the same thing. I'm just reviewing P&Ls and budgets, and it was like, okay, I don't like, this isn't why I got into making games. It's great that like I've been promoted up, and that always seems to be the goal. It's like, oh, I want to be the top dog because you get more money and you think you have more control and all that stuff. But once I got there, I was like, oh, I just hate this. Like, I don't get to work on games anymore. This sucks. So like, I knew Tanya, and I loved Rick and Morty. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And within the first year, Tanya left and went to work for J.J. Abrams. She's now at Microsoft on their first party team. We were like, okay, we need to find a studio director if Tanya's leaving. And I was like, all right. They kind of twisted my arm a little bit and said, will you step into it? I said, okay, I'll step into it. So I was mostly thinking about it originally as just kind of a temporary fill. But after I got in and was able to work with the executive team and our owners, and was able to actually do what I wanted to do with the studio rather than just be kind of a nameless executive. And I'm able to set up a bunch of stuff, like even being a fully remote studio, like we're always on Slack. We always have our video cameras on. We have weekly show and tells and team meetings where we get together and laugh it up and yuck it up at each other's stuff. We have a bunch of different social channels on Slack that we're all in. We do our version of Mystery Science Theater 3000 once a month, where we all get together and watch a movie and rag on it the whole time. Like, we just do a bunch of stuff together where it feels like, okay, we're all like enjoying the same stuff together. And that's the feeling I was missing. That's the feeling I was missing when I left Hasbro and came to Squanch. I was like, okay, if I can capture that and still run the studio, great, that's awesome. So that's kind of how I landed where it was. It was somebody needed to fill that slot, and I'd done it before. I'd been a temporary studio director at Big Huge Games for about a year when they got sold. So I kind of knew the operational side of it. I knew what you had to do to run a business. So it was just, I could fill in so the wheels don't fall off and we can keep making the game, and we'll see how it goes. And it just became better and better and better. And I was like, okay, I'll just stay. So
congratulations. And
it's been great.
You're my dream candidate. I love to work with people who've been doing it for a long time. This is why I recruit in games. And then eventually they're like, look, I've made my money, I've had a great career, I've been promoted. I just want to do the thing that I love so much.
Yeah.
And when you help them find the thing that they love, super fulfilling.
Yeah, so it's great. And I'm sure this is exactly what you're talking about, especially if they've struggled before, if they've struggled finding a home, or they've struggled finding their space, their
in
niche.
A bad place. Yeah.
They're in a really bad place. And you're just like, oh man, I can totally feel you. I've been in that situation, or I've heard about people I know have been in that situation. It sounds horrible. Or just like, man, that sounds just like a regular 9-to-5 that you punch in. You're not getting any enjoyment out of your work. Like, it's like a home for wayward devs in some way. It's like, hey, come in, and like, this will be the best studio you work at, is what I try to make it for everybody that works there. We want to be profitable. Obviously, we need to keep the lights on and paying everybody and grow the brand as much as we can. And
yes, like, priority one of business. Yeah.
Yeah. That side of it is one thing. But what I found is, if you make fun games, people will buy fun games. And that kind of,
that's true,
takes care of the economics a bit. So we had 8.5 million people play High on Life. So financially, it's been a big success for us, the start of an IP, and we built it all just by making dumb stuff that we thought would be fun and having a good time doing it. That's the key, I think, to Squanch. It's just like, we need to enjoy what we're doing. And if we don't, we like take a step back and go, why aren't we enjoying this? There's something wrong here. Because especially now that we've shipped High on Life, that's what success looks like to us, is being able to, kind of plug it in. It's a little chaotic, and we're never really we're always shaking the jello. We're never really like satisfied with where the game is. So it always feels a little uncertain while we're making it, but it's exciting. It's like, okay, are we going to get this done? Is it going to get polished to levels? Like, we're going to get the performance where it needs to be. We're always pushing it rather than playing it safe. So you can play it safe and ship a game with a smaller team. You hear folks like a couple of CEOs in the big studios are talking about how AI is going to make games so much cheaper to make now. And I just think it fundamentally undermines why games are fun. It's because gamers make games, and gamers know what's fun. They know what they enjoy. They know what their audience is going to enjoy because they are their audience. And, removing that and replacing it with any kind of tech, especially AI. We've been working in AI since I've been in the industry. So I'm familiar with AI's capabilities, and it's very good at doing monotonous work like a calculator would be. It's just a tool. But to think that you could replace the creativity and the special sauce, for lack of a better term, that comes with like people that are really passionate about the game they're working on and feel like they're supported by their team and they can take risks and they're not going to be left out on a limb if they propose something crazy. Like those out of the box, like crazy ideas, like all the dumb stuff that you see in games that surprised and shocked you and made you go, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that. That didn't come from AI. That didn't come from any procedural tech. That came from some dummy like me sitting there going, this would be funny, and typing it in.
Okay,
like
I was going to say I came from a creative genius, so there you go. Or some dummy like
a
you.
creative genius, yes. Mostly a creative genius, not a dummy like me.
I have one final question before I ask it. I want to point people to your website, squanchgames.com. Funny stuff on there, check it out. My last question, who has been your biggest mentor or mentors? Choose a couple if you need. And what is some advice that they've given you that has really stuck with you?
I don't think I could narrow it down to one specific mentor that has meant a lot to me. I've taken a lot from multiple different mentors over the years. Like one of the members of our board, Jen McLean, she Jen,
of course.
She was the CEO at the company that owned us when I worked at Big Huge Games in Baltimore. And I got to know Jen there and, became friendly with her. And like, I've learned different stuff from Jen throughout that time working there about, conflict resolution was a big thing that I learned from Jen, I think. And how to deal with big egos, stuff like that. I learned from her. So folks like her, like my boss at Big Huge was Kerry Wilkinson. He taught me how to do better self-evaluations. And I kind of learned how to do a self-postmortem every year because of him. It's just a way that I've taken a personal look at what you've done the previous year and like actually doing it and forcing yourself to do it. So there's been multiple little things like that I'm like, okay, this person has a great idea. This works for me. It's the same way that we do development at Squanch.
I was going to say that, yeah.
It's like, take what works, don't use what doesn't. Like, so it's been, I've been really blessed to work with a ton of really good people through all the studios that I've worked at. And I've been able to steal multiple good ideas and just good habits and good ways of looking at things from them. So I can't really shout out one specific person, but there's been a lot of folks that have taught me along the way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. We've been talking to Mike Fridley, who is the CEO of Squanch. Mike, where can people go to work for you, know more about you, contact you if you want to be contacted?
Yes, everything's on our website. So squanchgames.com. There's About Us section. We have a newsletter. We just released our second comic. So that's all the news is about the comics right now. We just did a bunch of comics with Titan that are really cool. But it's all there. All our job listings are there. You can apply directly from the website. It goes through Rippling.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your humor.
Sure.
of you.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. To catch all the latest from Here's Waldo, you can follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. We'll see you next time.